Good morning. I had wondered if the moon would show up in our reading today, and of course it has, right? The opening card that we have for today is the Nine of Swords. The challenge that we are working with today is the Charioteer, or the Chariot. The way we're going to be getting through the challenge is the Queen of Wands. And then the ultimate outcome that we have for today came in as the Two of Wands. So we've got a lot of wands showing up today and a pretty poignant sword card as our opening card. And full moons are always interesting, right? Because they actually bring a lot to the forefront by way of our emotions and things that we can't really ignore. When we consider the moon and what it does to the earth, right? It actually has an effect on the tides in our oceans and how much they rise or fall. And they're actually at their highest point of rising and falling during the time of the full moon. And so it's important to consider that, being that we are also a high percentage of water, that the moon also has an effect on us. And when I used to work in coffee shops, the police officers would come in and often say that it was during the time of full moons that they had the most intense evenings and the busiest evenings, because a lot of people's emotions are brought to the surface during times of full moons. And granted, because the sun is in Virgo right now, in order for there to be a full moon, the moon has to be an opposite sign, right, which would be Pisces. And so people who have planets in Pisces or their sun in Pisces have likely been really strongly affected by this full moon, as they've been working through their emotions and kind of witnessing themselves in this way. And so when we consider this card here, the Nine of Swords, it's a person who is very much stuck in their mind, right? They look kind of sleepless. Underneath them, you see this kind of battle going on. And it's something that I think we should talk about because, as I've mentioned in previous readings, we have these tools, right? We have these 4 tools that we are entrusted with, being that we are in body, and we have one of them which is the mind, and one of them which is our emotions, one of them which is our will, and one of them which is our physical body, right? Because the physical body is the container for all of these things to happen. It's more solid, whereas all of these other things kind of shift in their own unique way, right? And when we consider the swords, which is speaking to the element of wind or element of air, it can be something to look at, because our mind, wherever we put our attention, can really take us to a different number of places. And sometimes it can be quite paralyzing because of where we place our attention in the mind, right? It can actually keep us up at night as we kind of weigh and measure things within the mind. And so we have this interesting dono for our reading today. The challenge that's coming in is the Charioteer. Now, the Charioteer is also kind of a symbol for the moon, because it is a symbol of Cancer as a zodiac sign, and Cancer as a sign is governed by the moon. And it's telling of where we let our emotions lead us, right? And if we let the texture of our emotions govern our movements, because we can see that this person is leaving this city or, encampment, this dwelling kind of area, and they're going off on their own in their chariot, and they have these 2 creatures in front of them that don't have any reins on them, which are actually leading the chariot in one direction or another. And so we have to be careful and aware of where we let our emotions lead us, and how much we drive our chariot by that current that is going on underneath the surface within us, right? Because emotions are very powerful when we consider water as an element and what it does in the world. It actually carves out ground, right? Like we can go to glacier walks where we see that huge glaciers carved out the terrain that we walk through in the world, and they also carve that out within us in a lot of ways as well. And the emotions can be powerful, right? They can bring us to a sense of movement, which is not determined by the mind, and it's not determined by the body in a conscious or even subconscious way. It's a movement of energy, right? Emotions are energy in motion. And so we have to be careful on and aware of what drives our movement, right? Because the charioteer can be this symbol of someone kind of claiming the role of the victim, or the person who's claiming the role of being victorious. And that is solely determined by how you let these two creatures in front of you guide your own chariot, right? What you allow yourself to be led by way of all of the energy and emotions that are going on within you. The way that we're going to get through the challenge is an interesting card. It came through as the Queen of Wands. Now, the Queen of Wands is a symbol of Aries, and this journey that we have around evolving our sense of self, right? The self with the lowercase s or the self with the capital S, right? Like the little kid who's coming into the world wanting to have all these experiences versus the more refined individual who has gathered all these experiences and has acquired this sense of who they are based on what they've gone through. And so it brings up this sense of identity, right? And it's really interesting because I've had some really intense conversations with people recently who are working through some things around identity, right? And what we claim to be defined by in life by way of what we've experienced or what we've been through or our childhood or our upbringing or, you know, this circumstance or this experience. And they're like, well, I am this way because this happened to me, right? It has a little bit of a taste of victimhood in it. And that's, you know, it's become such a weird woke thing to talk about because our experiences do shape us, right? For better, for worse. And yet we also have to consider that we are in this malleable state as long as we are in living and long as we are embodied, right? We have the ability to edit the story and look at it from a different vantage point, because we can say, for instance, you know, the person who grows up in a place of hardship can say, you know, I was born to addicts, I'm going to be an addict for the rest of my life and there's no way out of it. Or, you know, granted, and this is just an either or, but it's not really an either or situation. There are hundreds of different possibilities, right? Or the person could say, I grew up in a family of addicts, and so I am going to angle my life to make sure that I stay away from the people who would encourage me to also become an addict. And I'm actually going to surround myself with more conscious people who don't fall into those habits, right? Or maybe they devote their life to actually helping addicts, right? There's lots of different ways that we can work with these energies, and we don't have to claim our identity by the experiences that we've been in. You know, I often ask people who say, I am this. I'm like, oh, are you? Is that your entirety of you? Is that 100% you, right? Or is there maybe 10% that is something else? And another 10% which is something else? And another 10% which is something else? And sometimes these aspects of ourselves are contradicting, but can we understand that this sense of who we are is something that's constantly being shaped by what we choose to surround ourselves with and what we choose to experience. So I think that there is a big energy being spent in that area right now, especially because we have Jupiter over in Aries, interestingly enough, right now in retrograde, and bringing a lot of expansion in this sense of understanding self and who we are. So I think it's something interesting to consider, what drives us and if we actually understand it, right? Because when I was drawing these cards and in the process of my apprenticeship to learn the tarot system and astrology, I also had an opportunity to be part of a school annex around self-study. And in that annex, we also did a lot of group work. And so people would sit around in a circle, both male and female, and share experiences and get feedback based on what they had observed in that week. And it gave me a lot of perspective in regard to being able to observe ourselves and also being able to observe other people without this stamp of judgment, more in a place of detachment in order to better understand something. And I think if we all got that kind of education, we wouldn't be as hard on ourselves as we are oftentimes. But I like to bring that into my readings, understanding and having some kind of sense of detachment around where we can observe where our mind goes, during the times of full moons, for example, or where our emotions go and how they get triggered with certain things and how we act out on those things. And if we can have a little bit of a sense of detachment around it, we can better understand it and not get so identified with what we see and observe, right? Because when we get identified with things, we end up being like this fellow in this card, very sleepless and stuck in our mind. Which brings me to our final card for today, which is the Two of Wands. Okay, so the Two of Wands is a person who feels called to do something else. It's like the call of the wild. It's like, okay, I have all this going on here in my life, but I really want to go over there. And there's this sense of this kind of pull in two different directions between where we want to go and what we actually have to put our attention toward. And so there's this energy in this card that's reminding us that, it's a lot easier to move forward towards something that you want to build if you take care of the things that are actually pulling your attention away from that. Because there are these two wands here, right? We have one wand in the fellow's hand and one wand behind them bolted to this wall. And so it's a matter of tending to things that you need to take care of, right? So we have a full moon today, right? It came in this morning, yesterday, late evening, depending on where you are at in the world. And so we're able to see a lot during a time of a full moon, right? More is revealed that's in the darkness. And so what are you seeing? What are you seeing that you need to maybe put some attention toward and some effort toward? Because I think the reading today is encouraging us to do that. And especially being that, we have a couple of wands coming in today, and Mars is up in Gemini, and we have Venus over in Virgo. There's a lot of energy that's being focused on how we see things and how we make plans of how to accomplish things. And so if there's something that you want to accomplish and get done, I encourage you to take the time to tend to it. Because you may not be able to do it all in one day. It may take several, devotions of putting your time toward it to make it accomplished, to have that discipline with yourself to be able to figure out when to pull in the reins to go in this direction or this direction, so you can make sure that you're staying on your path. But that's what we're looking at right now. You know, we're being honest and really clear with ourselves in regard to what we see and the things that we need to tend to. And I don't think that it's useful to kind of beat ourselves up in the mind about it. It's more a matter of putting your feet on the ground and putting your time and your energy and your effort in a dedicated way toward that which you want to build. And it's likely going to take a lot of time to do that, but the winter is a good time to work on these things. I send you all a good wish, and I hope you are well and enjoying your weekend wherever you are. I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.